public or progressive media in Canada and in the West generally still use colonial scripts. So the way that a lot of social justice causes and the media and the stories they tell will use things like calls for feminism, the need to liberate Middle Eastern women from their oppression as a justification for imperialist wars in the Middle East. And the way that those sort of social justice causes get roped into colonial narratives, even in our progressive media. So I think as much as it's about being critical of the way that sort of a commercial media benefits off of dividing us and marketizing us and setting up divisions between us, we also have to be very, very aware as media makers and as media advocates that we are likely doing the same thing unintentionally. But to me, that's still the great promise of public media, is that because we build it from the ground up, as opposed to receiving it from elsewhere, we have the ability to build into our practices anti-colonial languages, anti-sexist languages, anti-homophobic languages. We have the ability to actually create architectures that allow us to avoid those scripts and to write new ones. And so I think at a level of media production, there is great hope for public media to address stories like yours and stories like Sylvia's been telling us as well.
Good question. Yeah, sure.
The other thing that I would just say is that first, the CBC and CTV and Global are all made up of individuals, and that there are actually sometimes you can actually have really interesting interventions with specific reporters. And I don't know this city and well enough yet to tell you here are all the people that you should be talking to. But I do know that, and I'm in an interesting position here because I am simultaneously my own activist on the side and also, you know, people's representative. So but I always tell people that, you know, actually most people become journalists because they're really interested in telling stories and telling them well. And you can sometimes have really great conversations with people. And a few weeks ago, maybe it was last week, 2 journalists in, I think, Sudbury did a series of articles on what it's like to be a trans person in the North. And the trans community and many of my friends in the trans community have a really good understanding of how they want their stories told and how they do not want their stories told. And a friend of mine had a really great and responsive interaction with that reporter, where that reporter kind of addressed all of her concerns, and she was actually able to kind of steer to some extent or make changes to the way that representation was happening. So I would say that sometimes actually even mainstream journalists can be your allies if you know who to talk to and know how to talk to them.
Wayne.Williams at CBC.ca is the news director for CBC Vancouver. Okay. Johnny.Michelle at CBC.ca is the regional director for CBC Vancouver and BC. You have their emails, you can email them. They're obligated to respond. They're legally obligated. Yeah, let's just say that they, yeah. But no, absolutely. Call. You know, it's on the public to call our media on the misuse of language. There's a question here.
Sure. So, kind of responding to Sylvia's idea of massive neutrality, I'm wondering, why are we, as progressive and radical media consumers and media makers, why are we so afraid of leaving this massive neutrality? And how much is the commitment of public media to objectivity actually holding us back?
Good question. Really good question.
I love your question. Thank you. I think there's many reasons. For us, is this need to be legitimized and to be valorized as having authority. And so much of media is about having voice, right? Being able to have the authority to speak in your own voice. And that's what we denied when we said that's anecdotal. This is the official primary source, right? Which usually means government release, press release, Monsanto's press release, or the Gold Corp view on development. And we lose a lot. We lose our own credibility, right? Because the people that are being affected are no longer moved. And when you show up to an event, they're not. It's nice that you're there, but they know, that this story is going to be presented as if there is those equal sides, and both sides are equally being impacted, right? Poor Monsanto is being denied the right to charge, billions of dollars for the seeds that the campesinos have grown, and so when the Brazilian peasants won their challenge, right, and took them to court and won, immediately they went and counterstood and said, oh no, this was, a biased court, the rule in favor of the peasants. So that's what we face, right? The first is we need to get over this need to be legitimized by the same structures of powers that dehumanize us and subjectify us. That's the first. The second part, I think, within the media, whether we call this commercial media, independent media, there is great imbalances as to who's invited to speak. So by virtue of being a brown person in a white world, let's face it, you feel compelled to adjust if you want to stay there. Otherwise, it becomes very uncomfortable. And so a lot of people adjust in the name of a greater good, right? We think, well, if I can just tell the story in the way they want me to tell, at least I'll get to tell the story. At least the story will go, and it will only be a 10-second soundbite, but I'm telling the story. I don't know how many of you believe that. I don't. I think that by trying to imitate the same practices the commercial media does, we're devaluing the value of our own voices, of what it means to be in this privileged space. When you do a story, I did an interview, and this was a progressive woman who interviewed me as being elected vice president for AMAR, for the North American region. She interviewed me for half an hour. When she aired the interview, there was a 10-second soundbite of what I said, and then the rest was her own monologue of, for 2 minutes, and that was it. And so I think it's this, we lose the opportunity to expose a richer story of who we are, of what is happening around in our world, of the different seeds of resistance that are now beautiful plants in many places. But instead of celebrating and helping tender to that garden, we're squashing them. And so we're going to the other side, and here the Monsanto side, because we need to be balanced. And so completely silence what we just try to present. So we lose our own credibility, we lose our own integrity, and we do not reflect or represent that voice that we are pretending to speak to when we do that.
Thank you, Sylvia. Before we thank the panelists, I'd just like to thank, in closing, the Coast Salish peoples for sharing the richness of their land with us for this meaningful discussion, and I hope we have honored their legacy with the ideas and conversation we've had here today. Please join me in thanking panelists Jean Broughton, Tyler Morgenstern, and Sylvia Richardson for their great contribution to today's panel. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.